welcome back to Killer Stories. This is part 2 of Jonbenet Ramsey Theories and Suspects. I'm your host, Bobbie Holmes. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, I suggest going back and listening to it first. You may think you know this case, but I dropped a lot of information that you'll need to understand these theories. Those of you that are up to speed, let's get into it. The Ramseys believe that an intruder entered the home, wrote a lengthy ransom note on the spot, then killed Jonbenet. There are a handful of suspects that could fit into the intruder theory. Let's start with Bill McReynolds. Bill was a neighbor of the Ramseys who actually was just over at their house 2 days prior to the murder. He dressed as Santa during the holidays and played Santa at Patsy's Christmas party. All the children sat on his lap and told him what they wanted for Christmas, but he paid special attention to Jonbenet. He arranged a surprise meeting with her on Christmas Day. There's a theory that maybe Bill, dressed as Santa, lured Jonbenet downstairs where he sexually assaulted and killed her. Bill's daughter was actually kidnapped 22 years earlier in 1974. Which is either a really big coincidence or maybe he was behind his own daughter's kidnapping as well. But don't forget, Jonbenet was not actually kidnapped. The ransom note made it seem like that was the plan, but Jonbenet was murdered and found inside the house. Bill's wife later wrote a play where a young girl was sexually assaulted and murdered in a basement. That sounds very familiar. He did have some really weird and creepy things to say about Jonbenet. Bill went into heart surgery clutching a vial of glitter that Jonbenet gave him as a gift. Well, she didn't give it to Bill, she gave it to Santa. Bill said no child has ever given him a gift before, and Jonbenet was a special girl. He had a request for his wife. He wanted the glitter to be mixed in with his ashes if he were to die. Bill stated, quote, "Her murder was harder on me than my operation. She made a profound change in me," end quote. Super creepy statements and really weird about the glitter, but there's no evidence that points to Bill. Just the fact that he seemed to have an unhealthy obsession with the 6-year-old. But maybe there was evidence. Remember how Patsy invited her friends over immediately after calling 911? Well, they cleaned the house for her and potentially cleaned away evidence that could have pointed towards one of these intruders. The second suspect in the intruder theory was the Ramseys' housekeeper, Linda Hoffman Pugh. She had a key to the home, which supports the fact that there was no forced entry into the home. Patsy stated to authorities that Linda was struggling financially and had asked them for a loan of a few $1,000s. The Ramseys denied her that loan. You guys are multi-millionaires. You can't help out a woman struggling. The theory is that Linda may have seen John's bonus check in the office for $118,000, and that is why she listed that exact amount in the ransom note. She lured Jonbenet downstairs and planned to kidnap her. Something went wrong, and she ended up killing her. When Linda was questioned by investigators, she denied involvement and had her suspicions that Patsy was behind the murder. She claimed that Patsy had multiple personalities. She had witnessed her going apeshit about the simplest things, for instance, arguing about what dress Jonbenet was going to wear. Linda's alibi was that her and her husband were both at home sleeping the night of the murder. The only problem with this alibi is that her husband was sleeping on the couch, so I don't think he can vouch 100% she was in their bed all night. Linda Hoffman Pugh was never listed as a formal suspect. Another person on the list of suspects for the intruder theory was 26-year-old Michael Helgoth. A man named John Kennedy worked for Michael's parents at their local junkyard. Kennedy told police that a month before Jonbenet's murder, Michael was bragging about a job that he and a friend were planning that would land them about $50,000 to $60,000 each. He said to Kennedy, "I wonder what it would be like to crack a human skull." As we all know, Jonbenet's head was bludgeoned. After the murder, Michael Helgoth supposedly made a tape where he confessed to killing Jonbenet. John Kennedy attempted to communicate his concerns to police at least 20 times following the crime. They didn't seem to show any interest in his theory and did not return any of his phone calls, which I do find suspicious. Police need to follow all leads. February 13th, 1997, District Attorney Alex Hunter held a press conference where he had a message to Jonbenet's killer. He said, "The list of suspects narrows. Soon there will be no one on the list but you." 2 days later, Michael Helgoth committed suicide. Maybe he thought the police had caught on to him and started freaking out. Possibly he would rather die than go to prison. The final intruder suspect was Gary Oliva. He lived a few blocks away from the Ramseys. In 2000, Gary was arrested on drug charges. Inside of the backpack he was wearing, there was a picture of Jonbenet Ramsey. When questioned about the photo, Gary said, quote, "Jonbenet's murder touched me very deeply," Oliva told the Denver Post. "I feel she was an exceptional girl whose death was an exceptional loss. I felt the need to build a monument, a shrine, to remember this little girl." His backpack also contained a stun gun. The autopsy showed 2 small marks on Jonbenet's lower back that resembled that of a taser or a stun gun, but that was never confirmed. In 2016, Gary Oliva was arrested for child pornography. Everything on his computer was of girls under the age of 10. Michael Vale, a friend of Gary's, gave an interview with In Touch magazine, so take this with a grain of salt, saying that Gary called him a day after the murder occurred and said to him, "I hurt a little girl." He also mentioned Boulder, Colorado. No other local police reports from that night involving little girls were reported. I personally don't think the intruder theory makes sense. Investigators tried to recreate entry through the broken window in the cellar. It's a high window, and they basically fell into the basement, landing very loudly on the ground. And you would have to climb up on something to leave that same way. From the crime scene photos, there were cobwebs in the broken area of the window. If someone had just passed through it, those cobwebs would not be there. Plus, this is December in Colorado. There was a ton of snow on the ground. There were no footprints on the snow from anywhere surrounding the house. My opinion is that she was killed by someone inside the house. Which brings us to the family theory. It seemed like police, the media, and most of America thought that John and Patsy Ramsey were the ones behind Jonbenet's murder. Greg McCrary, a retired profiler with the FBI, said statistically it's a 12-to-1 probability that it's a family member or a caregiver that commits the murder of a child. Plus, there was the staging of the ransom note. I totally believe that this was written by Patsy Ramsey. I think she attempted to change her handwriting, possibly why there was a rough draft found. She changed it enough that it wasn't a perfect match, but close enough that she wasn't ruled out. Supposedly, no one else was aware of the amount of John's bonus, and it was such a strange number to demand. We already covered the weirdness of this ransom letter in the last episode. I just don't think it was legitimate. John and Patsy acted very strange following their daughter's death. They refused to cooperate with police. They didn't have a formal interview with the investigators until 4 months following Jonbenet's murder. If you wanted to find out what really happened to your daughter, you would do everything in your power to exonerate yourself so the police can focus on finding the real killer. It definitely seemed like they were hiding something. One theory within the family is that Patsy struck Jonbenet after a bedwetting accident. Then, assuming she was dead, she strangled her to stage the intruder theory. If her bed was wet, I think that would have been listed on the crime scene findings, which I did not come across in my research. The housekeeper was the only one to comment about Patsy's multiple personalities. Everyone else vouched for Patsy as being a kind, loving mother who adored Jonbenet. I'm not sure exactly how it happened or why, but the theory of John and Patsy killing Jonbenet seemed to be the strongest. And it's what I believed happened until recently. The CBS documentary, The Case of Jonbenet Ramsey, released in 2016, and it focused strongly on one theory, that Burke killed his sister and John and Patsy covered it up. I mentioned earlier that Burke tended to be a bit physical towards Jonbenet. I mean, more than a bit. He hit her in the head with a golf club. Well, what if she did something to piss off her big bro? Like possibly hearing him in the kitchen, coming downstairs and reaching into his bowl of pineapple. After all, it was his fingerprints on the bowl, and she had pineapple in her stomach. There was a Maglite flashlight on the kitchen table next to the bowl of pineapple. Those things are ridiculously heavy. Perhaps he used it to strike Jonbenet in the head, not intending to kill her. The staging of ligatures, strangulation, and a ransom note done by John and Patsy to help protect their son from a murder conviction. But what they did not know at that time was that children under the age of 10 cannot be convicted in the state of Colorado. If this is what happened, they should have just come forward and said it was an accident. 2016, 20 years following the murder, the case resurfaced in the media. Burke did an exclusive interview with Dr. Phil. He proclaimed the innocence of himself and his parents' involvement. He has stayed out of the public eye as best he could all these years. He says he took his sister's death really hard. But interviews with child psychologists show Burke acting very nonchalant and matter-of-fact about the situation following her death. Here's an audio clip from 9-year-old Burke.
So, what did they tell you about why you wanted to come talk to me?
See if they can find who, you know what?
Well, let me tell you a couple things, Brett. First, my job is probably to get to know you as best as I can. Make sure that you're okay, because things have kind of been hard, I imagine. Okay. Are you going to school?
No, because I'm trying to stay away from the rest. My friend said that after school, there's all these meanie people waiting there going, hello, did you see Burke in class today? No, I did not. I think he was absent. Oh, thanks.
So do you feel like you're pretty safe?
Yeah.
Yeah? Do you ever worry about it?
Not really.
No?
I'm usually just playing my Nintendo.
Yeah? Any secrets, do you think?
I probably do, but I don't really remember them.
Yeah.
And if I did remember any, I don't think I'd tell you.
Why not? I'm a good person to tell secrets to.
Because they're secrets.
That's true. But things changed at your house a lot?
A lot, yeah.
Yeah, what's changed?
Well, the police have it blocked off and stuff.
Yeah. Well, what about for you and your parents? Okay.
Parents are sometimes crying.
Yeah.
But I'm basically just going on with my life. You know?
What do you think happened?
I know what happened.
I mean, when she got killed. How do you think that happened?
I think, well, I asked my dad where did they find her body, and my dad said I found it down in the basement, and so I think that someone took her very quietly and took her down the basement, and then maybe took a knife out, or something like that.
You think that's how she died?
Or maybe a hammer in the head, maybe.
So what did your parents tell you about your sister dying?
Or just when I got there to the house for kind of type thing. But my dad said, Jonbenet's in heaven now. Just got burst into tears.
How bad? How are you dealing with it now?
I kind of forget about it because I'm just going.
You're just playing your video games all the time.
Go, go.
It can be hard to tell exactly what is being said in the audio. The psychologist asked him if he felt safe, and he said, yeah, even though supposedly someone 13 days ago broke into his house and murdered his sister. You know, just busy playing Nintendo. She asked if he had any secrets, and Burke says, yeah, probably, and if he did, he wouldn't tell her. She asks him, what do you think happened? He responds, I know what happened. Insert creepy laugh here. He says someone used a knife or a hammer, and he does the freaking like slasher movie stabbing motion, which is so strange for a 9-year-old to be doing, especially talking about his sister that just died. Then he says he kind of forgets that his sister isn't around. Now, maybe the realization that she's actually gone just hasn't set in yet. I don't know the normal way for a 9-year-old to react with the death of a sibling, but he doesn't seem sad or upset to me. Burke is extremely socially awkward. I mean, you should see him during this interview with Dr. Phil. He was so uncomfortable, he was twitching and had this really creepy, weird smile on his face the whole time. I get being nervous speaking, especially about the fact that you're a suspect in your sister's murder, but it made me uncomfortable just watching it. I didn't watch them all. It's a 3-part series of Dr. Phil speaking with Burke, but I would love to know if he asked him about smearing poop all over Jonbenet's things. Explain the psychology behind that, please, Dr. Phil. I'm sure that would have made Burke really uncomfortable.
Now, first off the top, many of you have commented on Burke's smile, that when he's talking about something that's very serious, even though 20 years after the fact, that he's smiling. So let me give you my interpretation of that. This is anxiety. He's socially uncomfortable. I've seen it a lot. He's not autistic. He's not weird. He's not creepy. He's just nervous. This is a young man that has grown up in kind of a siege mentality. I've spent a lot of time with him over the last several months, and you have to understand, when this happened, he was plucked out because media was all over them. So he's been moved around a lot. He lived in isolation quite a bit, and he's just not socially comfortable, and he's certainly not comfortable being on camera. And so when people get anxious, sometimes they'll pull their hair, sometimes they'll, kind of do this kind of thing. For him, he just has kind of a nervous smile. And but he wanted to do this. And he wanted to do it because he knew at the 20th anniversary that he was going to get pushed to the forefront, because he's the one person in all of this that has never spoken. And he was already getting bombarded with requests and people finding him. We know of 5 or 6 programs, movies, documentaries that are being done right now about this story. But even with the discomfort, Burke wanted to do this because he knew that it was the 20th anniversary and he wanted to honor his sister. And he said if his story was going to be told, he wanted to be the one telling it. So, what you're seeing is nervousness. I've spent a lot of time with this young man. He's very intelligent, and he's very personable when you spend time with him. But what you're seeing is just anxiety expressing itself. Nothing more, nothing less.
Dr. Phil vouched for the Ramseys, saying that the Boulder Police Department had it out for them from the get-go. They were focusing primarily on John and Patsy as suspects. That is why they lawyered up and did not cooperate with the police. Again, I think if you are innocent, you do what you need to do to find out who murdered your child. Dr. Phil supported Burke and his parents, very adamant that it could not have been a family member and it just had to be an intruder. Almost as if he was on the payroll of John Ramsey. The CBS documentary came out that same year, and it strongly leaned towards the theory of Burke killing Jonbenet. Burke sued CBS for $750 million for defamation of character. 2 years later, the lawsuit was settled. Quote, "The parties have reached an amicable resolution of their differences and will have no further comment," end quote. I have to say, I think that Burke accidentally killing Jonbenet and their parents covering it up to protect him makes the most sense. Devil's advocate for my own theory, if it was one of the Ramseys who killed her, why are there signs of a sexual assault? I can't imagine they would actually do that to her, even as part of a cover-up. There is another theory I came across online, and it's absolutely ridiculous, but I'm going to tell you anyways. Some people believe that the Illuminati took Jonbenet and staged her death. Then young Jonbenet grew up to be Katy Perry. Yes, you heard that right. People actually believe that Katy Perry and Jonbenet are one and the same. The only thing this theory is based on is similarities in their physical features. I will agree that they have the same eyebrow shape, but people say they have the same jawline and eyes. But a lot of people look alike. My biggest question surrounding this theory, if Jonbenet was kidnapped, who the hell is the dead little girl left in the basement of their house? And don't you think her family would notice? Like, wait a second, this isn't Jonbenet. It's not like her face was beaten beyond recognition or anything. It was Jonbenet. In 2006, an elementary school teacher named John Mark Carr confessed to killing Jonbenet. He said he drugged her, sexually assaulted her, and accidentally killed her. Carr was tracked down and arrested in Bangkok, Thailand. The thing was that he didn't have any specific details about the crime. Everything in his confession was public knowledge about the case. And the autopsy did not show any signs of Jonbenet being drugged. It turns out he was just an attention-seeking weirdo who wanted badly to be connected to this case. His confession was false. I will never really understand why people do that. None of these suspects I talked about have been convicted because their DNA did not match the DNA that was found in Jonbenet's underwear. Investigators still believe that this is the key evidence in solving this case, even though it has been proven that the foreign touch DNA doesn't necessarily belong to the killer. I'm open to any and all theories, and I would love to chat with you about it. Jump on my Facebook or Instagram page and comment your theories under my post about today's episode. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Killer Stories Podcast. Make sure you're following me because I'm planning on doing some fun giveaways soon. Email me any story suggestions to killerstoriespodcast@gmail.com. The source information about today's episode can be found listed on the show notes. As always, thanks for listening. If you like what you're hearing from Killer Stories, share it with a friend. Leave me a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts. If you listen on another platform, a review on my Facebook page helps too. Until next time, this has been a Killer Story.